and I am a planting pastor. I am the new planting pastor, and if you don't know what that is totally okay, because I didn't know what it was, but apparently I am a planting pastor now, and the reason I am is because I'm hoping to plant a church. So, and I want to take a couple seconds before I jump into the talk, and I want to tell you a little bit about that, because I've been asked a zillion questions about it, and instead of having a zillion conversations, I thought, let's just have one, all right? And so just very simple as this. I want to tell you the reason I'm planning a church, the reason we're planning a church, because I never wanted to be a senior pastor. I just want you to know this is not something I aspired to. I feel, as of what happened in our last year of our lives, I've been feeling called to plant a church, like God is pushing us this direction. Because we want as many people as we know to fall in love with Jesus, the Jesus that I know and love. And so the most effective way that you can do that is actually plant a church. And actually the most effective church in planting churches is the church that you're sitting in right now. And so I was at Overlake for 17 years, and I get asked, why didn't you not plant from Overlake? And the reason I'm not planting from Overlake is because they haven't planted a church in 20 years, and you guys have planted about 18 churches in the last 20 years, which is amazing. And so what we're doing right now is we are building a church, a little church within this big church. And so we're putting a congregation together in hopes to move out in January, 7 months from now, to start a new church. And what I'm doing right now is I'm standing before you, and I'm going to just basically ask you this, because they've given me permission. I can't believe they said I can do this, but I would like you to leave this church and come with me. And so, like, they flat out said that I could say that. And I'm like, yeah, what church does that? They're going to regret it. They're totally going to regret it. No, but truly, we're getting ready to plant, and we're preparing to plant, and so we're gathering leaders. And the biggest question I get asked is where? And the answer to that is in the Bothell area. Well, then people will ask, well, where in Bothell? We don't know now. Until we have money in hand to actually go and put money on a place and say, here's where we're going to be, we're kind of holding that open-handed. But we're shooting for the Bothell area is where we're going for. And so what we're looking for right now is leaders of leaders. Those who are crazy in love with Jesus, those who are crazy enough that would want to step out in faith and try something hard. Because planting a church is one of the hardest things, if not from what I hear, the hardest thing that you can do in ministry. And I don't want to do it alone. And so my hope is if you are a leader and God is stirring you in your heart, and even if he's not, okay, we have an info meeting coming up next Sunday. So what I'm going to do is we're going to gather whoever is interested. We're going to meet in a room. It's actually the Baker room, room 139, and I'm going to share, here's the vision for the church, here's where we're going, here's what we're hoping to do. And so if you have any interest at all, and again, even if you don't, I still hope you would come. All right? All right, there's my little plug. That's the church coming up next Sunday, 9:30 in that room right over there, 139, the Baker room. All right, let's do this. Let's conclude the series that we started last week. It's a really long series, 2 weeks, and it's entitled Guardrails. And the truth about guardrails is this. We don't really notice them. We don't pay attention to them. We don't even think about them. That is until we actually need them, until we actually hit one, or until some pastor puts one on stage and then mentions it 100 times in a service like last week. That's about the only time we really pay attention to these things. But the whole idea of a guardrail is very simple. It is to create a small accident here in order to prevent us from a larger accident over there. The idea is that if we ram up against this, if we bump up against this, we'll do less damage to ourselves, to our bodies, to our car, than if we were actually to hit or to fly off the cliff on the other side. Let me give you an example. This here is a picture of a truck that was obviously in an accident. And as you can tell, the number of people around, the damage to the truck, you could tell the damage was pretty bad. Now, as you zoom out, you can tell how this accident happened. The truck obviously hit a guardrail. And what's amazing is that truck must have flipped in the air after it hit the guardrail, spun around, and then is facing the other way on the other side of this massive storm drain. And so it's a pretty big time accident. It's huge, and so lots of damage. But what you don't see in this picture is the damage that was actually avoided. Because there was a guardrail in place, the truck actually evaded what was on the other side. I did research on this picture. I want you to know that is actually the Grand Canyon. That is a piece of the Grand Canyon. So that guardrail literally created a small accident to avoid a Thelma and Louise situation on the other side. I mean, it's crazy. And you got to think the guy who got in that accident, he's probably not upset that he damaged his car. What he's probably he was probably hugging that guardrail afterwards because he was so thankful that there was a little accident that kept him from a larger accident and in fact saved his life. And so last week, what we did is we asked the question, what would it be like? What would it look like if we had guardrails in other areas of our lives? What would it look like if we had financial guardrails? What if we had relational guardrails? Guardrails around our friendships or guardrails in our day-to-day. Guardrails that would keep us a safe distance back from actual danger, from actual damage. Damage that could happen in our family, damage happen in our marriage, or damage that could happen in our work. And so what would those look like? And so last week, we proposed a new definition for guardrails. These are personal guardrails. And here's what we came up with. It's a personal boundary of behavior that becomes a matter of conscience. A personal boundary, that means a personal standard of behavior that becomes a matter of conscience. First off, they're personal. These are for you. These are for you. They're not for your brother, not for your mother, not for your brother from another mother, and they're definitely not for your significant other. Hey, I did it. Nice. So there you go. They are for you, and for you to establish for yourself personally. Now, where the rubber meets the road and what needs to apply for these things to work is it must become a matter of conscience. It must become a matter of conscience. And what I mean by that is that when we bump into these personal boundaries, these standards of behavior that we set, our conscience needs to light up. Red flags need to wave. An alarm needs to sound saying, warning, warning, don't continue down this way. Because if you do, it's going to be bad. So your conscience needs to be tied into that. So it works much like a nap zapper. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of a nap zapper, but this is a nap zapper. It is a very clever device that is used by people to stay awake while driving. It helps to keep drivers awake. And so what you do is you put it in your ear like such, and it fits like a Bluetooth, but unlike a Bluetooth, it only goes off when you begin to doze off. And so when you're driving and we naturally were to fall asleep, what would happen is your head would naturally start to move forward. Well, the nap zapper would sense that, and when it moves forward, it makes that sound, all right? It would go, you're starting to fall asleep, and it wakes you back up. And I'm telling you, it would create in me a small accident on the seat if that were to happen. And so it creates a small accident in order to prevent us, in order to wake us up to the danger that's actually in front of us. Truck drivers will often wear these things over long hauls when they're traveling all over the country. My grandpa was a truck driver. I love truck drivers. So any truck drivers in the audience?
Oh, yeah, we do.
Hey. Well.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I didn't actually expect someone to reply. Welcome, sir. So you're a truck driver?
Sure am. I've been driving truck since I was a pup.
Well, that's great, man. So then you probably heard of a nap zapper.
Heard of one? I got one in right now.
Wait, you got a nap zapper in right now?
I dozed off 3 or 4 times since you done start speaking.
Oh.
This here contraption, it keeps beeping every time you get boring.
Oh, jeez.
Works pretty good.
Well, thanks, sir. That's great. Thank you.
Dang right, it's great. You should hand these suckers out to all these people every Sunday you be speaking.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Who gave this guy a microphone?
Well, you did.
Oh, I did? Well, that was a mistake, that's for sure. Not going to happen again. All right. So the key to all of that, which was so fun, is that our nap zapper has to be locked into our conscience. So basically, it needs to be hardwired so that if we do bump into something, a guardrail, the standard of behavior that we set, it will wake us up. It will lift our head. It will go, warning, warning, you cannot continue down this road. And if you do, you're going to hit what's on the other side, and that is not good. And so King Solomon, he talks about this. He says in Proverbs 4, he says, above all else, guard your heart. So first and foremost, guard your heart. For everything you do flows from it. And if everything we do comes from right here, if everything that happens, everything that is a part of us comes from this starting point, then honestly, guys, we should be pretty proactive in protecting our heart. And so today what I want to do is I want to go through a few areas in our lives where I truly feel that we should have guardrails in. And so if you're new and you're just checking out this Christian thing, honestly, you picked a great day to come because this principle just doesn't apply to Christians. This is a principle that can be used across the board. But the reason as Christians that we choose to imply or use this principle is because we want to love Jesus back. Well, Jesus said, if you love me, you will what? You will obey me. But man, is it hard to obey God. It is so difficult to obey everything Jesus says, and so we need help. And the help that we're talking about today is the help of guardrails. All right, so let's do that. Let's jump into the first area that we'd love to talk about. And the first area I'd love to take a swing at is friendships. And friendships, because friendships are powerful. All of us could stand up here and tell a story about a situation where we were with our friends and we were walking down a path that we never actually wanted to go down, or in fact, we never should have been going down. Because friendships influence. Friendships are powerful. This is why our parents freaked out when we were kids. It's why they were so overly concerned with who we hung out with, who we spent too much time with. I remember, asking my mom, can I go stay at their house? And she's like, why? And I said, because they're amazing. Their parents are never home and we can do anything we want. My mom's like, you just answered your own question, son. No, and I didn't get that then, but I get it now that I'm a parent. And I care very deeply about who my kids are hanging out with, because all parents get this. Intuitively, instinctively, we understand this principle, that friends influence the direction and the quality of our lives. It is true. Friends influence and oftentimes even determine the direction and the quality of our lives. When I was in youth ministry, I would often tell students this phrase all the time: you show me your friends, and I will show you your future. Friendship is powerful, and not just for kids or for students. Friendship is still powerful for us. We are still influenced when it comes to the friends that we surround ourselves with. And what's so interesting and what I find so fascinating about friendship is that the thing that makes friendship so great, the thing that makes friendship so wonderful and so amazing is the actual same thing that makes it so dangerous. And that is this: when we're around our friends, we drop our guard. When we're hanging out with our pals, we lower our defensives. Therefore, in doing so, we are the most open or more open to influence than we will ever be. And so friendship is powerful. Our greatest regrets, think about this, did not happen by ourselves. Chances are you weren't by yourself, or it didn't happen around your enemies. The greatest regrets that we've had in our lives typically happen around who? Our friends. That party, that situation, that mistake that we made didn't happen by ourselves or in a vacuum. We were around other people. And so Solomon talks about this in Proverbs 13:20. He says, and here's what he does. He gives us a promise. This is beautiful. He gives us a promise and he gives us a warning, all in the same verse. Here's what he says. He who walks with the wise, or he who does life with or hangs out with, he who walks with the wise grows wise. That is the promise. But a companion of fools suffers harm. There is the warning. He who walks with the wise will grow wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. The promise is this, is that wisdom is contagious. You hang out with wise people, you will start to have wisdom rub off on you. It's just natural. It's like sports. If you play with guys or practice with gals who are better than you, what happens? You get better. Same thing. When you hang out with wise people, their wisdom starts to rub off on you. That is the promise. Now, the warning is where it becomes interesting. The warning is often misinterpreted. It is not, hear this, hang around a fool and you'll become a fool. It's not saying if you hang around fools, you'll become a fool. What Solomon is saying is that if you hang around fools, you'll eventually be impacted by their behavior. You'll be impacted by their behavior. Think about this. I have friends that are no longer on this planet because they were in that car. Now, they weren't drinking, but they probably should have been driving, or they shouldn't have been in that situation the whole time. Did they do something wrong? No, they were just feeling the impact of the behavior of the fools around them. And it was costly. A companion of fools suffers harm. So, in light of that, in light of all that, I'd like to suggest some very, and I mean very practical guardrails when it comes to the people we surround ourselves with. Now, just so that you know, these are made up. You are not going to find these in the Bible. And so you might say, hey, Jake, that's just your opinion. And guess what? You'll be right. These are just my opinion. But it is my educated opinion based upon conversations that I've had with people who no longer talk to their kids anymore, or pastors who no longer not only have their ministry is gone, but they've lost their marriage and their family as well. These happen from observations in my family's life, in my friend's life, in my life, and of course from the countless hours I've spent watching Oprah. So, I'm just kidding. It was Dr. Phil. And so here's my hope today. Just break it down and just tell you exactly what I'm hoping. I am not hoping that you would adopt these guardrails. These are just examples. What my hope and my desire is that you would start to solidify what guardrails look like in your life. Okay? So these are just examples. So let's go through them. Guardrails around friendships. The first one is this. Your conscience should light up. Warning, when your core group of friends isn't moving in a direction you want your life to be moving. When your core group of friends is moving in the opposite direction than you want to go, that should bother you. Okay? 1 Corinthians says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Now, I am not saying that you just throw your friends away and sorry, you are bad character. You're bad company. I'm going to leave you. Don't do that. What I'm saying, at bare minimum, at least have an additional group of someone in your life who shares your same foundational principles, your same essentials inside of your life, that share what's important to you is important to them. Otherwise, if you hang out with people who don't share the same values, you're going to end up in the same place that they're at, most likely. And so therefore, that is a guardrail. Put that in place. Number 2, when you catch yourself pretending to be somebody you're not. When you catch yourself to be somebody that you're not. And some of us have actually been warned by this. Your spouse has says, you know what? When you're around them, you're a different person. If you hear that, you should be freaked out. That should startle you. It should cause you to lift your head and go, okay, wait a second, am I going in the right place? Because you don't want to end up in a place where you're not someone you're supposed to be. Okay, that's a guardrail. Number 3, when you feel pressure to compromise. The key word there is feel, not when you start to compromise, because at that point it is too late. All right? But when you feel the desire to compromise. In other words, when something that was never a temptation in your life suddenly becomes a live option, that should freak you out. That should scare you. Again, a guardrail that you bumped up against where you want to reassess where you're going and what you're heading and what you're doing. Number 4, around friendships. When you hear yourself saying, I'll go, but I won't participate. I'll go, but I won't participate. That is like saying, an alcoholic saying, I want to hang out in a bar because they have a pool table. All right? You don't want to put yourself in that situation. That is too close. Remember, it is a companion of fools that suffers harm, not just the fools. Number 5, when you hope the people you care about the most don't find out where you've been or who you've been with. And not because you would have to defend what you did, but because when you think about that person knowing or having a conversation with you, that you actually at that point, you start to develop a defense, an excuse even before you see them. Just in case you run into them, just in case they call you or text you. If that is the case, you should feel like you need to move. That should move you to do something about your situation or adjust where you're going. All right, those are guardrails around friendships. Now, and I'm sure there are a few of us in this audience, as I'm talking, we're thinking to yourselves this thought. You know what, Jake? That's not very loving. In fact, that's not even very Christian. Did not Jesus hang out with the sinners? Didn't he do that? Aren't we supposed to love people? Aren't we supposed to be like Jesus and love people? I hear that. I get that. I understand that. But please hear me on this. Let's not confuse compassion with wisdom, because compassion does not require you to make a poor choice or an unwise decision about yourself. I'm going to say that again. Compassion does not require you to make an unwise decision about yourself. Here's what I mean by that. The best thing that you can do for your friends is not to join them in jumping off of the cliff. It's not even to join them in their tempting situation. It is to stand on this side of the guardrail and love them from here. And the reason you want to do that is because when they fall, when they're in pain, when they're lost, when they need help, you are here in a place of stability, in a place of strength, in a place where you can reach over and you can help pull them back up. Because the rest of their friends, they're just flying off the cliff with them. But when push comes to shove and life falls apart, they're going to need some help. And we need to be standing in a place where we can actually help them. Does that make sense? Okay, great. I think caring from that position is honestly the most loving thing we can do. All right, well, let's switch topics. I want to jump gears to the Mac Daddy of all guardrails. I want to talk about relationships, all right? Because where there is desire, we have a need for guardrails, but in the area of our physical and sexual intimacy, we need reinforced steel. And I found this out the hard way. When I graduated high school, that was when I truly came to know Jesus. That was when I really fell in love with him. That's when my desire to follow him really hit the ground running. And honestly, I looked like a different person, and I was a different person. I was completely changed by the grace of Jesus. And so when I met my friends from high school, I got excited to talk to them because I wanted to share Jesus with them. I could not wait to tell them what God had done in my life. And so I ran into this girl that I used to flirt with back in high school, and she was working at a grocery store, and I ran into her, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to tell her about Jesus. This is going to be amazing. And so I asked her what she was doing. She says, I get off in 5 minutes. In fact, why don't you just take my keys? I'm in the apartment right across the way, and you can go in and you can wait for me. And I thought, yes, all right, this is going to be great. Okay, totally naive, all right? I was 18 years old. I was catching frogs and blowing stuff up. That's what I was doing. I did not know what was about ready to happen. So I go over there, and I get into her apartment, and I sit there, and 5 minutes turns into a half hour, into an hour and a half, and pretty soon I fall asleep on her couch. Well, she comes home, and she comes into her home, and she comes and sees me on the couch, and she thinks, opportunity, all right? And so she comes, and she lays with me on that couch. And then she proceeds to start kissing me on that couch. And I just need you to know, that never happened to me before. And so maybe my dog licking me in the morning or something like that, but I've never woke up to lips before. And so it shocked me. And to say I overreacted is kind of an understatement because when I realized what was happening, my conscience lit up. And I stood up right there out of this. I didn't sit up. I stood up, and I launched her off of me onto the hardwood floor. And you would think, as a new, compassionate Christian, that I would be concerned with her well-being. But no, I beelined for the balcony from there, and I just started crying. I started sobbing. I'm not talking like a little tear dramatically went down my cheek. I'm like, I can't breathe. What have I done? What have I done? And I'm so upset. And apparently this girl recovered. She came back into joined me on the balcony, and she's like, put her hand on my shoulder. I'm like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I just wanted to come here, and all I wanted to do was tell you about Jesus, and now I'm going to hell. And this is not good. And I wasn't going to hell. I probably didn't even sin. I mean, the thing is I bumped into a guardrail I didn't even know I had. Apparently, kissing random girls was a guardrail for me, all right? And actually, it still is. I just want to make that clear. So, I got to nail that one. That's good, yes. But I wish I would have known this back in the day. I wish I would have known what Paul said in 1 Corinthians. He instructs us with this. He says, flee from sexual immorality. Flee. It's not be careful. It's not, watch out. It's not get as close to the edge as you possibly can without going over. It is flee, not flirt, flee. Flee, 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 flee from sexual immorality. Jesus jumps into this conversation in a passage in Matthew chapter 5. Here's what he says, and it's a very famous passage, but here's what he says. He says, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Ugh, tough. Okay, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. Dang, that's rough. Okay, and throw it away. But it is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off, throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. This passage is popular and often debated, but the point is crystal clear. Men, we're never to look at ladies ever again, okay? It's exactly what it said. No, it's not saying that. What Jesus is saying is this: do whatever it takes to remain pure. He's saying do whatever it takes to remain pure, to stay on this side of the guardrail, because the stakes are too high. The pain is too tough. The repercussions are too far. And honestly, guys, we know this. Most of us in our lifetime, when it comes to this area, have jumped off that side of the guardrails, and we know the emotional pain that it carries when we move too far in a physical relationship. And we understand this. And so what Paul is saying and what Jesus is saying is do whatever it takes. Set guardrails. And so let's talk about guardrails. And specifically what I want to do is talk to the married folk. So if you're married, I'm talking to you. The number one guardrail, here you go. Don't be alone with members of the opposite sex. Don't be alone with members of the opposite sex. This is huge. Last week, I shared that this is one of my guardrails. This is one of my guardrails. I'm not alone with ladies that are not my wife. Maybe my daughter, but that's it, okay? But I'm not the only one who has this guardrail. Pastor Jonathan Alexander, our pastor, has this same guardrail. Pastor Rick Warren, probably the most popular pastor in the United States, has this guardrail. Billy Graham has this guardrail. Mother Teresa had this guardrail. Now, granted, she was a nun and didn't see a lot of guys, but she had this guardrail, okay? And here's what's beautiful about this guardrail, is it not only protects us from temptation of sinful behavior. So catch that. It doesn't just protect us from the temptation of falling into sin. It actually protects us from the accusations of inappropriate behavior. So nobody can accuse you because you weren't there. Does that make sense? You stop the questions before they ever get there. In ministry, this is essential. I don't need questions. I don't need anything to derail me from what the business God has asked me to do. So this is a guardrail that I have, and if you're married, I would suggest it, and your spouse would probably appreciate it. Okay? Number 2, don't confide in or console members of the opposite sex. Don't confide or console. So I hear people say, but he needs me, she needs me. They're the only ones that understand me. No, they don't need you specifically. What they need is help. And if you want to help them, find someone who can help them without getting emotionally entangled in that situation. You know, it's crazy. After first service, I came down and I sat where, stood where you're supposed to have people come talk to you. And a lady came up to me and she said, you know what? That was it. That's what destroyed my marriage. He started to console in some other lady, and we talked about it. And she said they've been divorced now. It destroyed their relationship. He doesn't see his kids anymore because of that. And apparently, he still struggles with that situation. It's not just the sin. Jesus forgives us for sin, but the repercussions from sin sometimes are painful and last us all the way up until eternity. And so there was a lady, this one gets too many people. And guys, just so that you know, it starts with texting. It starts on Facebook. It's not just in person, instant messaging, emails, things like that. We need to be careful that we don't get emotionally entangled with someone who is not our spouse. It's very important. Number 3, for married folk, limit your internet access. Job says this, he said, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Last week, I shared with you the guardrail that I have in this place, and the fact is this, I don't have the password to the computer in my own home. And the reason I don't is my wife has it. So, in order for me to get on the internet while I'm at home, my wife needs to be present. That is very restricting and sometimes frustrating, but so beneficial. And if you think that's too extreme, I get that. That's okay. I'm kind of that way. But at least have an extremely strong filter. You know, an extremely strong filter. And sometimes we know our way around filters. And so there's a great website called xxchurch.com, which is a great way for you to get connected into accountability with someone else, that they'll know exactly what you're looking at on your computer. They even have it for your phones as well. It's called X3 Watch. It's an app that you can download, and it keeps absolutely great. It keeps your eyes being where your eyes need to be. And this is a huge topic, and as much as I think we could go into this for a long period of time, and there's so much more to talk, I can't spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to say this. If you are struggling in this area, when it comes to temptations of what you see on the internet and those things, because it's out there, it's difficult. We have help for that. We're actually going to be having a class called Conquer that will be happening at the end of July. And if this is an area in which you struggle and you need help, let's be honest with ourselves. Sign up for this class. You can do it on the website, and you can get the help that you need. Okay? All right, number 4. When you feel sexual or emotional desire towards another person other than your spouse, tell someone. Now, I'm not saying that you need to tell your spouse in that situation. A time may come for that. Because I remember when I told my wife that I thought Angelina Jolie was attractive, and now every time we watch one of her movies, my wife is eyeballing me. Total mistake. No, not a mistake. Anyway, but I have accountability. I truly do. For the last, honestly, 15 years, I've had lunch every Wednesday with the same guy, and we talk about life, and his name is Dave. He is the dearest friend to me, probably my best friend next to my wife. And next to my wife, he knows everything about me, all my dirty secrets, all my laundry, all those things he is aware of. And if anything ever, a desire came towards another person, I feel like I can tell him, because he's a safe place and a person that can help me get going or get on the right path before it goes too far. And so if you don't have someone like that in your life, I would strongly suggest to find someone. And it takes time, but it's so worth it. All right, last one for the married folk. Your spouse should know and be comfortable with your guardrails. They should know and be comfortable with your guardrails. Don't leave them in the dark. You can't do this. Don't leave them in the dark. In fact, what I think is great is as you're establishing these, bring your spouse into that processing, into those conversations. Say, hey, here's an area that I honestly struggle with, and I need your help. Let's find a way where I can set up guardrails together to keep me from walking down that direction. Okay? That's married folk. Let's switch to the singles. Singles, number one thing when it comes to physical and sexual temptation is this. You just need to gouge your eyes out with a spoon. So, I promise, you do that, you're going to be good. You're going to be, actually, probably, and then you won't be good. Well, at least you won't have people looking at you to go out with you, because you look terrible. I can't believe I just said that. Can we erase that from the actual footage? No, we can't. Okay, good. All right, here's what I really mean. Apply the principles. Here's the first one. Apply the principles of married guardrails to your own life now. Put those in your life. Now, you can't follow all of them, but prepare now to train to be the type of person that you want to marry. For example, one of those is not be alone with someone of the opposite sex. I'll just be flat out honest with you. When I was dating my wife, that was actually a guardrail we set in place. I know you might think this is crazy and way too extreme, but based upon my history and the mistakes that I made with ladies prior, I did not want to do that again on this one. And so I set a boundary that I would never be alone with another woman that is not my, that time, girlfriend, then my fiance, and now my wife. So that I started training for that before I got married. In fact, when we were dating, there was a lady named Martha. I love Martha. She was like 50 years old. She was single. She had lots of time on her hands. And so Martha would go to the movies with us. She would go on our dates. I'm not even kidding. You think I'm joking. Martha was so wonderful. I mean, she doesn't live with us now, but she, She was amazing, and she would help us, and it was so great because you're not tempted to, to go too far when you got Martha looking at you, on the couch, or Martha sitting right in the middle. It just was weird. So, but it was great, and it worked really well. It definitely set my marriage up for a win. All right, number 2 for single folk. Here you go. No sleepovers. No sleepovers. Those are for 8-year-olds. If you think you can handle it, if you think, we're not going to go this far, and dude, you're fooling yourself. Come on, don't put yourself in a situation where you honestly can't handle it. And if you think you can handle it, you're lying to yourself. Because we were built that direction. We were built to move that way. And so what we need to do is we need to set guardrails back and say, you know what, I'm not going to go to that. And I don't know, it may not be sleepovers, it may be something else for you. But again, these are just examples. All right, last one for singles. If you're in a sexual relationship right now, if things have gone too far, my suggestion will be to break up and then take 6 months off of dating. Yeah, exactly. When I would tell the students that in student ministries, I'd have the same response. Like, zip, nobody takes us up on, or very few people take us up on that one. But I will tell you this, those who have made all the difference in their relationships now, because it takes time to recover. It takes time to renew and to reset. We want to live in God's best. And if you're not living in that right now, let's get on this side of the guardrail, set the guardrail, and take some time to recover. All right? Okay, now, that's a bunch of guardrails. Friendships, relationships, married, singles, lots of things to cover. And I'm sure you're probably asking, Jake, is that too extreme? Is that too extreme? I mean, those seem pretty extreme to me. And honestly, I'm going to tell you this, I don't think so. And this is just Jake's personal opinion. I don't think they're too extreme. I mean, Jesus himself did some pretty extreme things while he was here on earth. Number 1 is he came down to earth. He didn't have to, but he chose to. Why did he choose to? To take the weight and the sin and the things that we have done and pay the price of our punishment for us on our behalf. He picked up a cross, which is pretty extreme, and he walked to a place called Calvary, and he got hung. Now, he wasn't forced to be nailed to the cross. I've heard many people say his love hung him there. He hung there by his love, and that's true. He just allowed people to pierce his body, and he died. That is extreme. But probably the most extreme thing was he didn't stay dead. 3 days later, he rose, and what did he rose to do? He rose back to life to what? To give us life. He came back, did an extremely crazy thing, and he gave us life. In book of John, it says this, I have come, this is Jesus talking, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. In some translations, it says you'll have life and have it abundantly, and that is true. You will have life and you will have it abundantly. But the whole point of Guardrails is this. It is to have that life. It is not for legalism, okay? We are not trying to become great rule followers. We want to be Christ followers. We're not trying to become the best guardrailers on the planet. That's not what we're trying to do. In fact, a lot of Christians, if you're not a Christian in here and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I knew it. They're all about rules and regulations. Well, let me tell you why we're all about that or why we want to do that. I don't want to be like the Pharisees, because the Pharisees, think about this, they put thousands of rules on top of God's commands. I'm not wanting to do that. We need to not be like the Pharisees, so we have to keep the heart of this in mind. And that is this, is that we want to love Jesus back well. And the way that we can do that, because it's so hard, is to put guardrails in place. He says, if you love me, you will obey my commands. And so you might be thinking, hey, Jake, that's a total contradiction of terms. You said that Jesus came to give us abundant life, but yet you want us to obey Jesus? Those don't seem like they fit together. And I'm telling you, somehow they do. Hundreds of us could stand up in this room and we could testify, we could declare the incredible blessing that we have received, the liberation, the freedom that we have found by being obedient to Christ. It may seem counterintuitive, but the truth is, that is what guardrails do. They bring us freedom. They bring us freedom in our relationship. All right, let's do this. I'm closing right now. Let's imagine that you've heard this sermon and you get up from this place and you walk out, and just like other sermons, it just falls into the back of your memory and we do nothing. We don't establish guardrails, we don't put them in place. If that's the case, if you step up and head on out of here and you walk to the door and you don't consider setting guardrails, I'm going to wager that 1 year from now, something is going to happen. Either sooner or later, you are going to find yourself sitting on this side of the equation because this thing is sloped. It truly is. You slide down here naturally because of our sin nature. And so 1 year from now, I don't know what it is for you in your situation. Maybe you're pregnant and he's no longer around. Maybe you lost your family, maybe you lost your marriage, maybe you lost your job, maybe you lost everything because maybe a mistake you made or you were just around fools who made that. You could be paralyzed. You could be, who knows what it could be. But 1 year from now, you're sitting here and you're thinking to yourself, dang, how did I get here? Why am I here? And then somehow you'll remember that crazy preacher that was there that one Sunday, year ago, that was standing up there and he was talking about these guardrails, and you think to yourself, man, I wish I could go back in time and change things. I would do it differently. I would establish guardrails. And then all of a sudden, a blue fairy shows up, all right? And he says, it's a he, I guess. So if you click your heels 3 times, magically, you'll go back in time 1 year from now. I'll just take you there and you'll fly back there. And all of a sudden, you'll be here and you'll be now. And it is here. We're right here 1 year prior to that situation. And you have that opportunity right now, right here, right today. You could do it right the first time and you don't have to experience that pain. But only, catch this, if you put guardrails in place. And if you do that today, if you do that this week. Friends, the time to establish guardrails, hear this, is not in the heat of the moment. It's not during the accident. When you want to put on your seatbelt when you're getting into an accident, you don't put it on in the middle of the accident, right? Oh my gosh, we're about ready to crash. I better get my seatbelt on. No, you put your seatbelt on when you get in the car in anticipation that an accident could happen. It's the same with this. We've got to establish guardrails today. We got to establish them today. And because here's the thing, nobody regrets guardrails. Nobody regrets guardrails. The only thing people regret is not having them when they needed them. And so I would love, for me, my prayer for this, for me and for you, is that we would live as people with no regrets. And I truly, to the bottom of my soul, believe that that happens when we establish some guardrails. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity we have to come and worship you. And to be in your house in this beautiful land of freedom. And as messed up as it can be, Lord, we still trust and serve you first and foremost. And so, Lord, I pray as everyone in this room is thinking about what guardrails should be in my life. And if they're not, I pray that you would help them to think through that. And that eventually we would establish guardrails not to be legalistic, not to be Pharisees, but God, to help us love you back. Why? Because you loved us first. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you again for who you are and what you've done. You went to extreme measures to show us your love. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen.